Hey, Matt.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, it's time to do the podcast, man.
All right. I'm potting.
Here we are. Okay, we're
I'm
starting.
potting. Are you casting?
Yes. Welcome to Hacking the Grepson. It's another exciting episode in our Make It... Wait a second. No, it's not. We're not talking about making a game this time. Checks the calendar. It's December. What does that mean, Matt?
It means we got to help some elves.
We got to help some elves by solving their increasingly difficult programming problems. Yes! Yeah. It's Advent of Code time. Woo!
Yeah!
Cheer! Bah, bah, bah.
We love Advent of Code time.
We do. I mean...
it's like an Advent calendar.
It is an Advent calendar, and except every day, instead of getting a little trinket or something, you get a new, potentially diabolical programming puzzle to figure out. And we actually started this podcast, as we've said before, probably, kind of to talk about the Advent of Code in a way. And now we've been doing it, 4 years, 5 years running?
Something like that. It's longer than I thought we had been.
Yeah. It's kind of a thing. It's kind of, if we have any traditions on this podcast, except for the way we start it and the way we end it, it's covering Advent of Code. And so, as of the time of this recording, half of it is done, which, if you check the calendar, may seem wrong because normally every year of Advent of Code is December 1st to the 25th. This year, Eric Wastel, the creator of Advent of Code, has decided to only do 12 days, most likely because he's just a super fan of the 12 Days of Christmas and had to bring that theme into the Advent of Code. Or he's just tired and wanted to stop halfway. I don't know.
Which is what I think he said. Because I've been doing this a long time. It's a lot of work. We're going to do 12 days this year. I thought he was going to go every other day. So we'd get 1, 3, 5, 7, right? Up to the 25th, I guess. Or start on the 2nd.
Is that 12?
Or something.
1, 3, 5, 7, 9... 11, 13, 15, 17.
Actually, 19, that would go to 13, so it'd stop on the
21,
23rd.
23. That would be 13, yeah. See, that's why I couldn't do that.
Well, then you can start on the 2nd and on the 24th. That's my birthday. But I actually prefer the 1st through the 23rd.
Yeah.
But that's not what he did.
That's not what he did. No, he's basically just doing the same deal except from December 1st to the 12th. And at the time of this recording, half of that's over. We've done, and I can actually include myself in this, which has not been true of every year, but I have gotten through both parts of all 6 days. Have you, Matt?
Yeah.
Right.
There's been a couple struggles, but none of them have been terribly difficult.
Yeah. We'll get into it.
None of the I'm throwing my hands up in the air and just going, I'm not doing this one. They've all stayed on the line of fun for me.
I will agree that for the most part, yes. There have not been any where in past years I've looked at it, I've read the problem and I've been like, nah.
What?
Nah. Nope. I'm out.
Yeah.
Which does happen. So
yeah, I mean, we'll get to a shortest path one sooner or later, and I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah.
I
think we'll get into it. We should just go. Let's go right to Advent of Code 2025 day 1.
We're there.
I'm looking at it. I have the description. I have my code. How do you want to do this? You want to start, or do you want me to start?
You start, because I didn't think to open those. So you can open that one, and I'll open day 2.
Okay. So day 1 is called Secret Entrance. And the basic idea of this is, at least for part 1, I'm not going to read the description because you can go on the Advent of Code and read it. But essentially, we're looking at one of those round dials that you turn left and right like a combination lock. And it starts and it goes from 0 to 99, and it starts at 50. And basically your puzzle input is a bunch of rotations. So you have to model a circular rotational entity and follow the rotations until you get to the endpoint. But it's not just where do you end is the answer. The answer is actually how many times do you stop on 0?
Not even stop. If you go Oh no, yeah, that one was it. No, you're right. Part 1 was you stop on 0.
Right. Part one is easy because you just stop. Like you turn the dial. Does it stop on 0? Make a mark.
Yep.
Do that through all the rotations, and you have it. So this one definitely was not difficult for me. It's basic string parsing, taking the input of a bunch of directions with L, number, R, number, and separating those into, if it's left, change the mark, the dial's value this way. If it's right, change it this way.
Yeah.
The only, I guess you could say, gotcha is that, you have to modulus it. So if it goes beyond 99, it has to wrap back around to 0. And if it goes past 0, it has to wrap around back to 99. You just count up how many times it stops on 0. Done.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
I mean, reading that the word modulo or mod at least popped into my head immediately.
Exactly.
It was not even I'm like, oh, it's a dial. Therefore, it would always stay in a range. Therefore, I'm just going to use a mod. Duh.
Yes.
Yeah, I did basically exactly what you said. Read the number on each line. If it was left, I made it negative. I added them together as I went, and then modded by 100. And then if it was 0, I increased it. I did have one stupid problem with day 1, part 1, which was
I missed. But you go first.
I missed the part on my initial read through that you started at 50.
Oh.
So I could not get I'm like, why is my answer so wrong?
Where were you starting? Just randomly?
0.
0? Oh, right. Yeah.
Like a normal safe. Nothing's normal in the North Pole, guys.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, if I've learned anything from doing Advent of Code for many years now, is that you must read the description. And when I say you must read the description, I mean you must read the description and comprehend it because, as programmers, as problem solvers, we love to make assumptions because it makes the work go faster. But then if you don't actually read the description and it says you have to start at 50, not 0, then you run into Matt's problem. But that's a common thing in Advent of Code. That's a problem, in word problems in general. The issue I had was that I didn't realize that and this comes up again later in a later day, is that the sample data is all 2-digit rotations.
Yeah.
The actual input is 1 and 2 and 3-digit rotations, which for some reason that threw off my code and I had to make an adjustment for it. I don't know what I did exactly.
I mean, if you were explicitly looking for a 2-digit code or 2-digit number, you would miss it. I just chopped off the first number and then converted it to an int, so it didn't really matter. Or the first letter, and then turned that into a sign, and then everything else is an int. So that wouldn't have affected the way my code's written. But you're doing your code in Lua this year, aren't you?
That's right. I am doing it in Lua, which is the scripting language that we both basically chose for our game in Defold and Love 2D. They both use Lua. I had used Lua on a past year, but I only made it through a few of them because it was not a year that we did together. It was 2020 or something like that. So I have not gone deep into Advent of Code on Lua, but I'm like, you know what? We're already working in it. I'm just going to keep going. And yes. But what about you? I'm assuming you're using Python, right?
Yeah, I went back to Python. I didn't have the brain space to try to do it in Lua along with everything else I'm trying to do in December. And then and I considered TypeScript. So that's what I use for work, but then I remembered that that's what I use for work, and I wanted to do something else. Yeah. So I did Python because I actually like coding in Python.
That's important. You don't want to be fighting the language while you're doing these because they're hard enough sometimes to not deal with that. So
exactly. Yeah, I'm doing Python. I went back to my setup from last year. I have gotten to make a few tweaks as we have gone through. I'll probably call those out as on the given days when I was like, hey, my template needed to do this, or I added this cool class, or this feature got added to my setup. But beyond that, for day 1, literally it was, where was my 2024 Advent of Code? I guess I need these files, copy over, create new repo. Okay, that seems to be working.
It was very, very helpful that I had attempted a past year in Lua because it forced me to make the template for new Lua puzzles, and I already had a library full of helpful methods, which I have added to since then. But Yeah, I mean, day one of Advent of Code is almost always like, wait, is my setup good? How do I use this? Does it need to be improved? And I spent way more time doing that than I did solving this problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you using VS Code as your IDE or what?
I'm using VS Code. I've been using VS Code, I think probably for every Advent of Code. I might have been using like Atom before that. I don't remember. But yeah, just VS Code. I'm using the internal terminal to generate and run to test the code. So yeah, I'm basically just living in VS Code.
I chose this year to SSH into my server, messfirma.org, and do 100% of the coding through tmux session in there, which is like Screen used to be, where you can have multiple like active windows, and I'm just keeping it running and attaching and detaching to my screen session or my tmux session every day. So everything I'm doing is in Vim and then the command line, which can be frustrating.
I was going to ask, like, and are you happy with that decision?
I'm not unhappy, and I've made some quality of life changes over the time that I'm sure I'll talk about as we go that has made it a little bit easier to deal with. There are times when I find it just more irritating than it's worth.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you ever have just issues with connectivity or lag and that kind of stuff?
No. I haven't had any issues with that.
Well, that's good.
And it's all going to a Git repo, so worst case scenario, I suppose I would just pull stuff down locally.
Yes. Yeah, ever since I started using GitHub to put pretty much any project that I work on that I care about, yeah, it feels like having that extra backup somewhere else. Yeah. And then I still back them up occasionally to like a file server. Like I'll just every few months go in there and do a git pull on all my repos down to a backup there. So I actually have it like 3 places, which is what I've always heard is the only way that data actually exists, if it exists in at least 3 places. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. You ever heard that?
I would argue that it's 3 places, but one of them has to be physical. Like you offload it onto a different disk that you're keeping in like a fireproof safe at a different location or something like that.
Well, I don't know how GitHub backs up their stuff, but that sounds like something they might do. So
I feel like GitHub probably itself is doing enough to back it up, given how much they would be sued if everything went down.
Well, I'm sure they have a terms of service that says like, hey, if we lose your code, oops.
I'm sure that's not one of the cases that's okay. It might be like, hey, we provide 5 nines of availability, and
right.
But your code goes down, we screwed up.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So part 2 of this is basically what you had hinted at before, which is it's not just if it stops at 0, but if it passes 0, which really comes up when you notice that some of the rotations are 3 digits, because that's multiple rotations going past 0 that you have to account for. And so now your final total is going to be much higher. I don't think that really tripped me up much, although that might have been actually where the whole 3-digit rotation versus 2-digit rotation issue came up, because now I had to actually keep track of how many times it spins around rather than just where it ends. But yeah, I mean, looking at my code, they look pretty much the same in terms of like at this point I didn't write like a method that was reused in solution 1 and 2, although I could have easily done it, and I'm assuming you probably did, but they're almost identical in terms of what they do, just that they keep track of more stuff.
Yeah, no, I added a count zeros function in for part 2, because part 1 I literally just went through and added and modded, and then if it was on 0, +1. Right?
Yeah.
Zeros turned out to be a little bit more tricky, because I had to add the 2 numbers together and then mod that, and then divide that by 100 to see if we crossed the 0 boundary. And that worked great in the positive direction, but then the negative direction, you had to do a little bit more tricky stuff with like adding -100 or subtracting 100, depending on how you want to say it, to the added value. So, okay, like, I'm already on the other side of 0, so I had to move over there before I started doing my counting. But basically worked. It wasn't too bad. Yeah.
Day 1, like usual, is pretty easy. Didn't need any help, really, and got right through it. So yeah, let's move on to day 2.
Cool. Day 2 is called Gift Shop. In this one, we take an elevator down one floor because I think that was what we were trying to fix in the previous one. Yeah. And in there, they are playing on the gift shop computer, and some kid one of the younger elves had added a bunch of invalid product ideas to the gift shop database. Oh, no. So then there was, how do they do this? They gave us a bunch of ranges of product ID ranges. They only have a few of them that we need to check. And so those are just like, 11 to 22, 95 to 115, and so on. It's comma separated list of ranges. Python has a built-in range function type class, I think, that made that stupid easy, as always.
Stupid easy is good.
So what we had to do is we had to find the invalid IDs by looking for any ID which is made only of some sequence of digits repeated twice. So 5555, right? Like 2 of those are 6464, right? Or 123 123. I guess 5 twice was 55.
Yeah, just 5. Yeah, if it repeats a number or series of numbers twice.
What screwed me up on this one was I missed the twice part of that, and I essentially solved part 2 for part 1, and then my answer was like way wrong because there was a lot more invalid IDs all of a sudden. So then I had to scale it back. I had to make it more generic and then make it so that at most you can find 2. It can be 2. The logic there is way simpler with 2 than with something else. But I had already done that. So it worked out.
That's a happy accident.
Yeah. What I wrote down as to what I tried to do is I intentionally didn't do it the simple way, partly because I missed it was 2.
What is the simple way? Like using...
Dividing by 2, basically, and looking to see if you can make the first half into the second half, more or less.
Yeah.
Slightly different than that, but basically that. You get a lot of hints, I guess, going that way. And I tried to do it the mathy way, and I wanted to specifically generate invalid numbers instead of seeing if there were invalid numbers or something like that. I essentially just had to go through and try to generate. Oh, right. I remember what it was. I figured out patterns that could be created to generate the duplications of numbers at various ranges, right? So if you have 1-digit number and you want it to 2, you make that 11. But if you have a 2-digit number and you want that to be 3, it's 101 or something like that. No, sorry, that has to be 4, 101, right? You take 2 digits, multiply it by 101, and that ends up as that digit twice. And then that kind of works as you go. And so I wrote a function that would generate those sequences of like 11, 101, 111, depending on how many digits I wanted. Mm-hmm. And then I just generated things and saw if they would work.
Okay.
Because there was a lot less things I had to look at.
I love it. I would have never thought to do that. And that was
I did that a couple.
That was just for part 1, or that was...
Well, it shouldn't have been for part 1. But again, I misread part 1, and I basically...
You were unknowingly doing part 2 in part 1.
But then once I realized that I was stubborn, and I decided just to stick with it. I'm like, I'm going to do this the most mathy way possible. Mm-hmm. How about you?
Well, I did not go that deep because for whatever reason, I did not get into the numerology philosophy of this like you did. I definitely did the first part the easy way, which was finding. Let's see. I think the thing that I learned in this day, because I was using Lua specifically, is that Lua, because I wanted to use regex. I wanted to use regex in part 2, I think, not in part 1. In part 1, it was literally just splitting the input and having it and then checking to see whether the 2 ends mirrored or not. But in part 2, where you have to find a more fine-grained sequence of digits repeated at least twice, then I wanted to use regex, and I found a regex that seemed like it would do it. But Lua does not use regular regex. That's something I learned. It uses this concept of pattern matching, which is almost regex, but if you try to run any regex you find for basically any other language in it, it fails. So you have to you have to translate it to the pattern matching that Lua does. I mean, that's just one of the many things where Lua differs from other scripting languages. I mean, the fact that they don't have arrays, they have tables, that they use one index tables, not zero index. Lua is full of little idiosyncrasies like that.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I've definitely spent a non-trivial time trying to kind of get Lua to work like scripting languages that I know better, like JavaScript or Ruby or Python. But anyway,
yeah.
So I this was the first one, and just as a reiteration, I keep track of all of these puzzles on a web app that I made last year, 2 years ago, I forget. It's in Ruby on Rails, and so when I go to make a new puzzle, like I actually create a new, node or whatever in this app, and I keep all my notes in there and all that kind of stuff. Why did I bring that up? I was talking about how I did this. I've completely lost my train of thought.
I assume that's where you were looking to read your results.
I am, but I'm trying to remember why this specific thing brought that up about Lua, and I don't remember. Wow. Man, my birthday is in a couple days, and I'm feeling the age right now.
Oh, that's right. We're December birthdays.
We are.
Well, you're thinking. I
Yeah,
can say.
ahead.
So yeah, like you said, part 2 was instead of only 2 repetitions, it's at least 2 repetitions.
Yeah.
Which then allowed for things like odd numbered results, I think. No, it still had to be even numbers for the. That was one of those things that
because it's repeating.
Right.
So you have to have little couplets of.
Oh no,
repeating.
you can have odd numbers if it's a single digit or a triple digit that's repeating. Like if it's an odd number digit that's repeating, and it repeats an odd number of times, then it ended up as an odd result. So like 1, but if you like 555 is valid,
right? But it had to be at least twice. So
yes.
it could be odd, but it had to be big. But it had to be 3 or higher.
But I remember odd being the thing I was struggling with in my initial attempt at being able to figure out part 2 before I knew what part 2 was.
Yeah, I remember. Right, I was talking about pattern matching and how I had to translate the regex that I found into a pattern matching thing that would work with Lua. And I said this was the first puzzle this year that I used an LLM to figure that out. But also in my web app, I keep track of my progress, but I also keep track of each puzzle and whether I, as far as I'm concerned, used major help on it, just so I know for my own, cognizance, if I look back on these and know which ones I'm weak on, so I know which ones I need to improve on. And major help to me is like I used like a plugin that solved a huge thing, or I looked at an existing solution and tried to reverse engineer it. But then I'm like, you know what? LLMs are kind of special, so I made that its own category, and so now at the top of each one, I have an asterisk if I used major help, and I have a little robot icon if I used an LLM. Nice. So I used an LLM to translate the regex into pattern matching, and then
I feel like that's totally valid. You knew what you were doing; you just needed to figure out how to do it in that language. I think that's a very reasonable use of an LLM,
and
that's not cheating.
Yeah, no, I didn't just say, here's the problem, figure it out. That's not fun. But what is also not fun is knowing that I need to do a thing and just not having the time or the wherewithal to do it, and knowing that an LLM has, this is a solved problem. I just need it to do it and make it happen so that I can move on with my life. That is how I've justified it. But I still like to make a note of it so I know which ones I was able to do just out of my noggin and which ones I needed like actual external help to get through. So
I've been using LLMs here and there, mostly like I would use a search engine. Like, how do you do this in Python again?
Yeah.
Like, what's the syntax for that? Or every once in a while I'll end up with a line, like my indentation, Python's indentation, the white space matters. Mm-hmm. It was not interpreting blocks the way I thought they should be interpreted based on indentation. So I copied my code and pasted it into ChatGPT and I was like, why is this not? And it's like, you missed a parenthesis. Which incidentally is when I went and installed a linter for my problem, which I hadn't done before.
Oh, that's excellent.
It's inline in Vim. Like I installed a plugin. So I used an LLM quite a bit to figure out how to do that. Because I'm like, I've never done this. And I got mouses. I got my mouse to work in Vim through SSH, which was less trivial than I thought it would be. Between the tmux and the SSH session, it was an odd, because they both, and my terminal. Like my terminal wants to grab the mouse. Mm-hmm. The SSH session wasn't getting it in the first place. Then when it is, the tmux session would get it, and then I was in Vim inside of that. So like I had multiple layers of like, what does my mouse do? Mm-hmm. And then I also still want to just be able to turn it into a normal mouse sometimes, which turns out I could just hold Option when I highlighted, and then it worked out just great.
What terminal emulator are you using?
I'm using iTerm as
iTerm,
that's my actual terminal, and then I think I'm on Bash as my shell. But I'm in tmux, which is I have not used before. Actually, that's not true. I used it very briefly earlier this year when I was playing around with my server, and I went, I don't like this because it's not screen. And I know all the keyboard commands for screen are in my brain because I used it for decades.
Well, now, why not keep using screen? Why use tmux?
Some of the things I wanted to do weren't as easy to do in screen. So I'm like, all right, I'm learning. Okay. That's one of the things I was telling Mike. I'm telling the audience, I guess, that I was telling you, that I bought a little like macro pad keyboard thing, like a Stream Deck. And one of the things I have on there when I'm in this mode is little buttons to switch which screen I'm on, because Control B is a much harder keyboard command to hit than Control A. Ugh. And so like I can remap that, but like I'm like, okay, let's learn this.
That seems like the perfect reason for one of those, unless you're a streamer or something. That's the only other place I've seen something like that.
Yeah. B is in such a weird spot on the keyboard. It's not comfortable to hit with either hand, in my opinion.
Yeah, you definitely have to do like that's a weird claw move.
Oh, this was template wise, I added a new thing on this one, which was I started keeping track globally inside of my solution of which solution I was working on, if it was part 1 or part 2. Because I had already written all the code for part 1, and then I needed just like in one place to change the size of the split, basically. Is it 2 or is it more? And it was one line, and I didn't feel like passing things through. So I started baking that in so I could just make tactical changes on the fly without rewriting entire functions like I've used to have to do.
So when I do a new template for basically any year of Advent of Code now, after getting all that set up, my template has like the title, the day, whatever the like bash hashbang shebang thing is at the top.
Shebang.
But then the shebang. But then it also creates like function solution 1, function solution 2, and that's
I do that as well. But then those often call out to other functions, and it was those other functions where I needed to have, this is solution 1, this is solution 2. Go do it this other way.
Okay.
And the one I needed to pass to was like nested several deep, and I didn't want to rewrite all my function signatures. So it's just like global variable.
No, global variables are bad, except when they're incredibly useful.
Yep.
Especially for something like this. Who cares about global variables?
All right. So that was let's see. Do I have any notes on part 2?
I mean, I talked about mine basically. I tried a couple plugins before I went to an LLM. Shout out for Lua-regex and lrexlib. But they still didn't do what I wanted them to do. So rewriting a method to do it was the way to win.
A regex to do this is really clever. I'm sure it's doable. I don't like regular expressions enough to do that.
I don't know. They feel like the Swiss Army knife of string parsing when it comes to this. Unless it's HTML. Don't try to regex HTML. But
yeah. Oh, I also started keeping track of my runtimes, or started paying attention to runtimes around here, because I think my initial run of it was a little slow until I cleaned up my code, and then it was like 0.03 seconds. I was like, okay, now we're talking. Day 3.
Day 3. Day 3 is called Lobby. We are continuing to go down after unlocking the secret code in Day 1 and going to the gift shop. Usually you exit through the gift shop, but instead here you're just taking the elevator to the gift shop. But now you're going down a staircase, and you get to the main elevators, but they're all offline. Ugh. And the only way to fix them is that you have to fix the batteries that are nearby because they supply emergency power, and they're labeled with their joltage.
But let's be clear. You're not fixing the elevators here. You're fixing the escalators down.
Yes.
So that, and I think another elf is working on the elevator or something. They're like, well, you can do this. And I'm like, you can just walk down escalators. This is stupid.
Yeah, yeah. That old joke, escalators, temporarily stairs. Sorry for the convenience.
Sorry for the convenience. I actually posted that meme in the Day 1 thoughts.
Yeah.
Or the part 1 thoughts.
So you're right. You are working on the escalator by fixing the batteries. And each of the batteries are labeled with their joltage rating, not voltage, because, that wouldn't be as cute. And they have a value from 1 to 9. And your input is basically a bunch of long strings of numbers with ones or nines in them. So like the first one is 98765 432 1111111. And that's called a bank. So they're referring to that string of numbers as a bank. And your job is to, and you can't rearrange them. That's important. Order matters. That's something that I got tripped up on this one, or I was hyper fixated on that. You need to find the largest possible joltage each bank can produce. So to use a much smaller example, let's say it's 3, 2, 1. If you take 2 and 1, that's not as good as 3 and 2. So obviously the answer is 32.
Yeah. It's also, but like 31 is also bigger than 21, but that's not big enough either, right? It's any combination of the digits in order.
Yes. And that is important. And once again, the whole order mattering as far as the way that I wrote my code was a problem in part 2. Part 1 worked out pretty well. I broke up the process into 2 parts. I basically went through the string of numbers, and I found the biggest first value that it came across, and then moving to the right of that, because once again, order matters, you find the biggest second value, which might be the same. You might find 9-9, or you might find 9-8, or you might find 9-1, but as long as you find the highest value first, and then you move to the right, you're guaranteed to find the highest value that way.
And that's exactly how I solved it.
Okay, well, good. Because that worked out pretty well. I had no issues with part 1.
Yeah, it's like start at the left, go until 1 less than the end, and then look at the rest, right? Because you knew it's only going to be 2 digits.
Right.
So I only need to not look at the last. I can't use the last one as the first digit, like no matter what.
That's the only exception, yeah, because then you don't have one to the right. So I would say part 1 went pretty well. Part 2, definitely, this was like the first time that I struggled quite a bit because now, all they did was change that now there will be 12 digits in the bank. So I think each bank, at least in the sample, has 15 numbers in a string, 15 or 16. And so now instead of finding 2, which is a much smaller problem space, now you have to find the best 12-digit joltage. And when I'm saying it out loud, it seems like, and maybe you'll echo this to me, that you can use basically the same kind of method to do it. It's just that you're finding more digits this time. But for whatever reason, I went through a whole mess of different kinds of ways to do this because I think you did it recursively.
Yep.
And and did you do the first part recursively as well, and then you just modified it?
I didn't need to do it recursively for the first part because it was already the end condition. It was, there's one other digit. If you have a 2-digit number and you need 2 digits, you know that you're done.
Yeah. So
that is the biggest number. If you have 12 digits, you need 12 digits. That's your biggest number.
Right. Which means that you have to keep like slicing it into smaller and smaller spaces, which, for whatever reason, what I was doing was kind of a modification of the first way, but just keeping track of more digits, but the issue I ran into is that in the end, it would not find the biggest number. It would be off like by one number. Like it would grab, I would start at 9, find all the 9s, find all the 8s, find all the 7s, da 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 da.
That's why. Okay.
But then it would grab, if there was like a 3 before a 4, it would grab that 3 and put it at the front when I needed it to skip it and grab the 4 or something like that. And so it would end up with not quite the most optimal. And that's because I wasn't doing it recursively. And I don't know if there was a way to fix that in the end. But in the end, Matt, your recursive solution in Python is what I ended up using to translate to Lua, using an LLM again to basically remap everything, and that's what found it. But I never would have figured out because I never think about recursive, and that's definitely a weak spot for me.
Recursion is my go-to, which is also a weak spot because there's plenty of places where recursion does not work, and we ran into at least one of those this time. Mine just for the first part, basically all I had to do between part 1 and part 2 was in the first part, I assumed it was only 2 digits, and then for part 2, I generalized that and made it so you were passing in a size to my original function, and then instead of looking at all the elements in the array except for the last one, it was all the elements in the array except for 1 minus the size you're looking for to find the first big digit. And then I just called it again with the remaining digits and 1 less size and let it keep going and then shove it all together and turn it into an int.
Yes, that was the way to go. I'm looking at my notes, and I also see that my initial plan was to, and you can see how this would already fail, is to get all the combinations.
Yeah.
And then add those together or find the best ones of the combination, which works fine on the sample data. But then as soon as you throw the input data, which is, big numbers, that fails really fast.
Yeah, they like to do that.
They love to do that.
I have this year been trying to preemptively guess where the problems are and not necessarily over-engineer for it, but try to get ahead of that. Like, okay, what if I generate this is going to generate so many numbers, or I'd have to look at so many. Can I just generate the results instead? Go backwards. Do dynamic programming. I don't like that phrase.
He says with derision.
I don't like the phrase dynamic programming. It's not. It just isn't doing that. That's not what it is. It's a bad description.
Yeah. It doesn't tell you anything about what you're actually doing. It just sounds dynamic.
Day 4?
Day 4.
All right. Printing department. You take the escalator down, you go to the printing department, and for some reason you get distracted helping them with decorations.
As you do.
And so they send you over to help pull out a bunch of rolls of paper, which in the sample input is represented as an @ sign, which I thought was kind of clever because it kind of looks like you're looking at a roll of paper head on.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you have this big wall, I guess.
Yeah, it's like gift wrap, pulling it out.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, so they're trying to break through a wall, and while they're doing that, and you're doing this other thing to give them more time to go do that. You're optimizing their workflow to give them more time. That was a stupid conceit of this one.
Uh-huh.
So you have a grid basically of empty spaces and rolls of paper, and you are trying to take out all of the pieces of paper, all the rolls of paper that you can get. And you can only get a roll of paper if there are fewer than 4 rolls of paper adjacent to it, including diagonals.
Because otherwise it would be too scrunch-a-buncha and you wouldn't be able to pull it out.
Exactly.
Is what I'm guessing.
Because you're in a forklift.
Right.
Forklift that somehow can rotate its, I don't know.
Magic forklift.
So they're trying to get into the cafeteria. So they gave us an example. And basically, how many can be accessed by a forklift was part 1. Looking at this wall right now as it is, if you don't take anything out, how many forklifts or how many rolls of paper can you remove based on that? I thought this one was pretty easy, but I also reused my grid class from past years.
Same.
And I added, did I add anything for part 1? Yeah, I just used my built-in neighbors function on my grid cells to count how many cells were both adjacent and inbounds that had rolls of paper in them, and then I returned that. Then I returned that if it was less than 4 things in my way. How about you?
Yes, thankfully, a 2D grid or a 2D like multi-dimensional array kind of data like this has been done before many times. And so I already had a Ruby class, and so I just didn't even need an LLM to translate it to Lua. I just, because I didn't do the whole grid class, I just did the neighbor count. And so I just did the given a grid and given a coordinate, an XY coordinate, look in all the directions, and I, have a thing of is it orthogonal or not? And then it just returns how many neighbors it finds, and if it was less than 4, yay. So yeah, that one was pretty easy. And I was worried that part 2 was going to blow that out of the sky, but
it wasn't too bad.
It was not too bad at all. It was
basically great. It was all right. You can see what you can access. What if you remove them? What can you access then?
Change the data.
So it's all right. You know what you can remove. Now you remove them. Now what can you remove? Do that more until you can't remove things. It's like, all right. This one did, if I remember correctly, cause me some issues in part 2 with it just taking so long. Let me see if that's true. So part 1, we all said the same thing. Part in the spoiler. Part 2, there's a really obvious way to do this, which I think is what I just described. Basically, look at it, remove things. Cool, you removed them. Can you remove more things? Until it breaks, and I was right that it took too long, but not so long that it was terrible. But I wanted to optimize what I was doing.
How long is too long for you?
Oh, it was just it was a handful of seconds. It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But I knew because it took that long that it was not an efficient way of solving it. And I'm like, I need to get my grid class more efficient because they're going to bring things up in the later one. So I previously only had the ability to get I had the ability for a cell to tell me what the adjacent positions were to it. Instead, I used that in a new function, a new method in my grid class, which got me neighbors of a specific cell. And that one actually gave me back the other cells so I could look at the values in them. And I optimized in there to make that more clean. And then it went much faster. Then I was just like, all right, get all the cells. Great. Remove them. Do it again. And that went a lot faster. But something about my initial, I was doing the same calculations over and over and over again when I was computing the neighbors in my original way. I wasn't caching anything. Everything was just there. And it was slow. So I cleaned a lot of that up. But otherwise, it was exactly what I described. What about you?
Yes, I initially thought when I was going through it that I would actually change the data because, that they're saying you're removing it. So it seems like, I should remove the element from the table, which is something I did first because that's just they say to remove it. I should remove it. But then you realize that that's actually changing the whole structure, yeah. Yeah, which is not what you want. You actually just want to indicate that there is no role there anymore because that's what you're using on subsequent loops to determine whether you can get rid of it or not. So, I just did probably what you did as well, which is just instead of removing an element, I just changed it to an empty, and then
that's exactly what I did.
Yep, and that was, and then I did that, and then it was no problem at all. I was actually kind of surprised that I ran it, and it just boop. And it was because every time I put an answer into the website and I hit submit, there's that 10 milliseconds of absolute terror that I forgot something or did something wrong. Because I got an integer. It's a big number. They're usually big numbers, but it could be off by 1 because I did some dumb thing. And but it went through. And I would say this was a very nice puzzle to work on. I like 2D grid puzzles just because I've done them a lot, and there's something you also work on a lot when you're making kind of when you're making games, like a 2D grid is a very popular and common way to set out like a tile-based level or something, and knowing what position a person is in or an enemy is in, and whether there's collisions. So yeah, this all just kind of rolls into that. It even goes into our game dev project. So yeah, I like this one.
Agreed. Yeah. Looking at my notes, I took this down from around 3.5 seconds initially to run to under half a second, which was still not as efficient as yours. So,
and that could be what are you running it on? What processor?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know what this thing is set up on.
I mean, it's like the difference of like hundredths of a second, so it's like negligible, but
I can't tell from here. I'd have to go look on the actual.
Yeah, you're running it on a server,
service.
which may not be nearly as powerful as.
Oh, and it's definitely not, because it's my web server.
Yeah, well, there you go. And it's running a bunch of other things, and you're also compiling code essentially. So, yeah.
But yeah, it worked out all right. Oh, I should say, up until day 4, that moment of terror that you're talking about, through day 4, every time I experienced that terror, I succeeded on the other end. I had no failed launches, at least through day 4. I think day 5 is where that changed.
Well, let's move on to day 5. Yeah. No, this was definitely another one that I had some issues with. Not in part 1.
Oh, yeah.
So this is cafeteria. So you remove all the rolls of paper, the forklifts break through the wall, and what's on the other side? A cafeteria. But of course, they're having issues with their inventory management system, and you're trying to help them figure out which of their ingredients are fresh and which are spoiled. And how do you do that? Well, they give you an input of several ranges of numbers, much like day 2. And then also, Advent of Code loves to do this. They do like one part of the data set and then a blank line and then more data set. And so you have to parse it into different things. So the top half is the ranges of ingredient IDs that are fresh or potentially fresh. And then you have just a series of integers that are the ingredient IDs. And you're basically trying to figure out, does each ingredient ID, like for example 1, fall into the range of any of the acceptable ranges. So the acceptable ranges in the sample are 3 to 5, 10 to 14, 16 to 20, and 12 to 18. So the first ingredient ID is 1. 1 is not found in any of those ranges, thus it's spoiled. And they don't care about the spoiled ones, they only care about the fresh ones. So I would say part 1 was my notes literally say part 1 was easy peasy. You grab the ranges, you grab the items, you run each item through all the ranges, and you check to see whether it's in the range or not. You're done.
As soon as you find one, boom. Yep, it's fresh.
Not a problem.
Until part 2.
Part 2. Part 2. Now I will say, part 2, I read it and I'm like, wait a second. This is too easy. Like, essentially now they're like, okay, ignore the ingredient IDs. We don't care about that. We only care about the ranges and finding out all the ingredient IDs that could be fresh if you counted up all the ranges. So now you've got the same ones in the sample, like 3 to 5, 10 to 14, 16 to 20, 12 to 18. So your job is to basically count up the ranges, ignoring overlap, so don't double count the same number, and
which is the hard part of this.
Yeah, and then you get a number of the potential ingredient IDs that are okay. And I'm like, wait a second, that's way too easy. Like I can, I think I'm trying to remember what I wrote originally in my code naively, and yeah, I think I used the same is fresh method for this one, but then when I looked at my input. I was like, oh, this is big numbers. These ranges of numbers are enormous. I'm going to run out of memory, and also you have to exclude for overlap. Mm-hmm. And I was like, so this was yet another one for me that I did use an LLM again to help me figure out what the right method for this is, which thankfully handled the overlap, but also just realizing that you don't need to literally like go through each range and count up each number individually. That's way too inefficient. You really just need to realize that the end range minus the start range plus 1 gets you the number of numbers in that range, and then add all those up. But obviously the hard part is the overlap, which that is where I feel like I kind of cheated because I didn't really figure that out. I just kind of had the LLM figure that out for me. So now I want to hear from you how you did it properly.
Yeah. I feel like this one took me forever.
Yeah.
Upon reading the problem, part 1 of the problem, I was immediately reminded of another problem. So like an hour or so of my solution to this problem was, what day did we have that in a past year where we had this concept that I had in my brain called disjoint ranges, right? Where I've got ranges, I've got a full range, but in between there's gaps, basically. And it was from 2022, day 15, part 2, it turned out to be. Also found out from that for some reason, my Advent of Code 2022, I didn't upload to GitHub. So fortunately, I still had it around. I uploaded it.
I didn't even get past part 1 of that one, so I can't help here.
That year, I did TypeScript, so it didn't super help me because I didn't have a good library. So I wrote a disjoint set, I was calling them disjoint sets back then because I still like that. But disjoint ranges, I wrote a class for that, and I spent almost all of my time on this one trying to get that to work properly with the overlaps, and ran into so many problems. I submitted 1, 2, 3. It looks like I submitted like 6 times before I was finally able to get it to work. I just kept being too high because I was double counting things, and I ended up having to actually physically draw out on the board the different cases of overlaps of ranges, and I had been missing one. It was the case where I was doing it when I was right. So I'm adding a range to my disjoint ranges. And on that, I'm making sure that there's not any coverage of that range anywhere else. And so the case that wasn't working was if my new range overlapped, if another range that already existed was fully inside of my range. I wasn't handling that correctly.
Oh.
The other way around, no problem. I was like, oh, my range all the way already covered? Cool, don't add it. But this other way, because I had just been changing the beginnings and ends of any existing ranges if it did that, but this one case wasn't working, and I ended up having to, and I'm sure there's a better way to do this, I ended up just as I went through the set to try to clean it up, instead of trying to fix things, I just added ranges to a new list, and then I made that my list of ranges afterwards. So instead of like, oh, I've got 1, 2, and I'm trying to add 2, 4, I'll make a 1, 4 in place. That wasn't working. So instead, what I did is I just made a new list, and as I went through and would add 1, 4 there and not add anything else. And that worked. But I had to find that 4th case that was just not working. Once I did that, it worked out really well. But man, it took me forever to get there.
Yeah, this one was very challenging, and I fully admit on the podcast defeat. And it's one of those things where I feel bad about using an LLM to figure out stuff like this, because what you figured out, I feel, is the meat of this, and I feel like I didn't, which is why I like to make a note in my notes that, this was something that I need to come back to rethink, because, well, and if I'm going to be honest, I'm never going to come back to it, but at least I know when I look at this that was my experience, because I don't want to act like I was super smart and figured this out and am a genius, but instead like, okay, here's what it was asking for, and here's what I could not figure out. And, the stars are meaningless. They're just, bragging points. But I also like having it done. And so there is a solution that works so that I can go back and look and study. Because, this is as much a fun thing. I don't really see it as a competition because I'm never going to win it. But I like having all this code in a repository that I can look at and learn from, because a lot of this stuff is it's just logic. It's just, here's a problem. Can you figure out the logic? It almost has nothing to do with programming. It's just, that's how you formalize it, and how it does it way faster than you could do this if you actually tried to figure this out on your whiteboard. manually, you would still be doing this, when the sun exploded.
Well, something I know to be true of myself in problem solving is if I can't understand how I would do it manually,
Yeah.
even if it would take forever, I have a really hard time writing the code to do it.
Sure.
I'm like, it's great that I know that the computer can do this faster, but I need to understand enough about the problem that I can actually walk through the logic in my head.
Yeah.
And then I can code it up. The good thing about this one being done is I now have a disjoint range class that works really well. I'm pretty happy with it. I believe this is the day that I added a linter. If it was not before that, because
I was gonna say I'm very happy to hear that using a linter at my job. This was the first job I've ever been at where every code change, every commit runs through a linter, and then when you push, it runs through through tests. But yeah, the linting and the just making us all write code in a convention that is the same helps in so many things, and you don't have surprises, and it's just easier to look up stuff and compare and contrast. I mean, it could be one of those things where like, well, no, I want to write my code in whatever way I want to, but in the end, like if you're working with other people or even just you're doing it yourself, it's past you contrasting with future you, it's very helpful to do something like that. So I'm a big proponent of it.
So day 6 comes back to a thing that we didn't like in the past, if I remember correctly, which is what I call squid math, which is I think they call it
cephalopod.
Yeah, so cephalopods. I think squids are cephalopods.
Yeah, sure.
But there was a previous day. It was 2021 day 18 where there had been homework, and that was the snailfish one. Which
yes, because they link to it.
Yes,
in the description.
So I was like, oh no. But this kid was in like elementary school instead of pre-calc or something, so it was okay. So we, for reasons, had to help this kid with his homework. And this episode, day 6, is trash compactor, and the elves are doing something. This seems to be a common thread this year. The elves are doing something, so while they're doing it, you're helping out with something else, which I kind of like because I like being the person that's like, okay, you've got this. How can I support you? Like that's the D&D characters I play. That's the way I like it.
This is the helper class year.
My literal job is helping other developers make their lives more efficient. I mean, this is great. I like teaching. So it did squid math. Squid math is weird because of the way that things
unusual.
are arranged. So for part 1, because it did definitely change for part 2, we got, well, the input's the same for both, which is you have a bunch of lines of numbers separated by white space. And then on the last line, you have a bunch of operators, either multiplication or addition, separated by white space. So for part 1, what we had to do is basically the operations happen in columns, right? So we looked at all of the first numbers that we got. So in their example, the first line is 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 8, 5, 1, and 6, 4. So 1, 2, 3 goes to equation 1 or operation 1. And then the next line is 45, 64, 387, 23. 45 also goes with 1, 2, 3 for that, that's the first one. And then the next line starts, the first number is 6, so that goes in there. And then the operation for that group is a multiplication. So then you multiply all those together. And then once you get the results of each of those vertical equations, you add them all up, and that was the number.
Yep.
So I didn't have a ton of trouble with part 1. I parsed it up. I tokenized by white space. Then I had, fixed number of columns that I was looking at. I converted the first n-1 to ints, and the last one I had a little ternary operator that turned it into either the addition function in Python or math.prod, which is the product function, and then I just ran solve after it, and that worked really well. The hardest part was probably parsing on this one, which was just
you could say that. Yeah.
Well, part 2 it definitely was. Part 1, it was just like, all right, the line that you're reading in is not the thing that you're doing. Like you have to read all the lines in and then you can do stuff. So it's like a 2-pass system, which is always feels bad to do. I don't like them.
No, you want to do it all in one pass.
Yeah, but 2 passes.
Just like my passwords.
Fine. I did 2 passes. It's okay. I'm good. It's fine. And then, yeah. So, yeah, let's see. My parse function is like for line and input, do stuff. And then if it was and then I go through it again and I look at each column. So not too bad. Yeah, basically the first pass, I'm writing things into columns. Second pass, I'm turning those columns into ints and operators and sending it off. How did you do part 1?
I did part 1 by using the same grid method as day 4. I pulled all the stuff into a grid, and then I did a second pass loop over at column first as opposed to row first, which is generally how I would do a 2D array anything. So the outer loop is all the columns from the first column to the first.
Oh, so you actually read your input into a grid.
I did, yes.
Oh, that would actually make my life a lot easier.
Well, anytime I see something like this the data is formatted like a grid, it just immediately makes me think, oh, I need to make this into a, internal modeled as a at least in Lua, a multi-dimensional table.
Well, it's funny because it doesn't look like that, right? It's some of the rows had multiple spaces in between numbers. Some of them had a single space. So it's like, oh, whatever. They're just formatted weird. That's the hard part of this. Oh, I can tokenize just by any white space. Cool. Didn't even occur to me to put it in a grid.
In part 1, the spacing doesn't matter. I just tokenized it by the space, however many spaces, and that got me all the numbers. And because all the data, all the tokens lined up in columns, it worked. I think I said in the Slack that the specific structure of the input data both made this easier and harder in different ways. Harder in part 2, easier in both of them. So I read it into a grid, and then I went over the grid. And initially, I was thinking I was going to do something clever with like an eval to turn the multiplier.
I've done that before.
Plus. Yeah, and believe me, it always feels bad, and I feel like I'm committing a crime when I use eval. And in the end, I didn't use it because I couldn't get the Lua version of eval to work that way. So instead, I just set once I basically went down the rows of a column and grabbed the numbers that were in that cell, and then when I got to the last one, if the last one was a multiplication, like initially I had the column total was a variable and it was set to 0. Now that works fine if it's addition because you're adding 1, 2, and 3 to 0. Yay. Hey, guess what it doesn't work for? Multiplication, because now you're multiplying all those numbers by 0. So all I did was a simple if it's a multiplication symbol, then I just set my column total to 1 instead of 0, and then when I multiply everything, it works out fine. So I don't know if that was clever or not, but that's what I did to figure out the operation that it was doing, and then I did exactly what you did. Yeah, I just went down each column, added it all together, and no problem.
In Python, the sum function takes a list of integers. Well, it takes a list of numbers. So I didn't have to have an initial value. I was just like, here you go. Here's my list of numbers. And product is the same way.
Yeah, I looked into making a reduce, which I would probably use in JavaScript, like an array reduce.
That's what I would have done. That's what I was going to do for product until I found out that there was a built-in.
Yes, but also even in the reduce method, you have to have an initial value, which once again, it's the same thing. It's like you would have to make it 1, not 0, because you don't want the initial value to be 0 if you're multiplying numbers. So I just, it didn't need a reduce. It just needed that, like, hey, are you multiplying or are you adding? And then just swap it in. So, so that was part 1. But let's talk about part 2.
Part 2, they made it so much more complicated. So,
oh, God.
Instead of...
Oh, God, did they?
So you remember the first line was something like 123 space 328 space 51 space 64. And previously, we interpreted that as the numbers 123, the number 328, the number 51, the number 64. But no. Now each column of the text is its own number. And you're supposed to go from right to left, reading the numbers, with the most significant bit being at the top and the least at the bottom. So the rightmost column was actually all blanks and then a 4. So that's the digit. That's the number 4. And then the next one has a 4, a 3, a 1, and then that's it. So it's 431. And the final one was 623 plus. So you say 623. And then you're supposed to add all the previous things that you've gotten. It's a post-fix operation kind of thing. But that was a little bit hard to understand from the text.
From a basic grokking parsing standpoint, yes.
And B, I didn't understand why right to left matters, because the commutative property of both addition and multiplication means that order doesn't matter. But one of our friends who's been on the cast before, Richard, I think it was Richard, was talking about how it made sense to him because when you hit that last digit when reading, or that last number when reading from right to left, there's that plus sign. It's like, okay, now I do the stuff. So it's like, read a number, read a number, read a number. Oh, there's a plus, do all the things. Now I'm done. Yeah. Whereas you did it the harder way. I duplicated the product number all the way across the bottom until I got to a new one. So it was times, space, plus, times, plus, 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 times, plus, 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 plus. No, I ignored the spaces. But
wouldn't they have doubled up sometimes?
It would have, except the nice thing about multiplying a bunch of zeros together is that it's 0.
Yeah, that's bad, though.
And adding a bunch of zeros together is addition? No, it's fine because you were doing them one column at a time. You didn't have to worry about anything else. So I would do from left to right, my first thing was 1. So 1 times nothing else is 1, right? And then I had 2, 4, and I would multiply that, and it's 24. It's 8. And then I had, I'm doing it backwards, right? Because it's still those stupid numbers. I had to use, if a column was all empty, that was my that was when I used it to figure out I needed to do it. That was the hardest part for me, was figuring that bit out. And then also the lines weren't all the same length. And so again, if you'd gone right to left and you'd done padding or whatever, or just looked at the length of the line, you might not have had that problem. But if you were throwing it all in a grid, I think it would probably be easier than you say column N, and it would give you all the stuff in it.
Yeah, turning this into a grid, I think, made it doable for me, because my first note when I saw this was like, OMG lol, okay, this problem is super mega string parsing. Like, this problem was basically all string parsing for me.
Oh, it was all parse, yeah.
Just like, can you parse this data that is in a strange format, and the actual logic of adding and multiplying numbers is not hard. But yeah, I had to completely rethink how I was doing this. I don't know what I was doing originally. But in the end, yeah, I still did right to left, and I used the same idea of like, oh, if this column is all blank, then like basically I would grab the numbers and I would put them into a stack, and then once I reached the column that was all blank, I'm like, okay, stack is done, translate to numbers, do the operation, add it to a total, and then move to the next one. The only thing that I got caught up in is that going from right to left or left to right, and I'm not sure how you handled this, but the very last one, because I was looking to the next leftmost column, when you get to column 1, there is no more, and I have the whole thing bounded by, like, don't go beyond the first index of an array. So I had to do my problem set operation one more time at the end of my loop outside of it, because it had put all the numbers into the problem set, but then it had looked left of column 1, found nothing, and then exited because there's nothing there, because it was looking for the next empty column to know that it was done. Yeah. So I probably could have rewritten it so you didn't have to do that, but I didn't, and I just did it one more time at the end, and it worked.
Yeah. So what I did is I knew my number of columns that I was going to have because, well, honestly, fortunately, the first line of my input was the correct length. Otherwise, I think I might have had problems with this. And then I appended extra spaces to the end of every line up to the length. but I think it's because I got lucky that the length of my column was correct because it should have not been.
I also had to rewrite my code because once again, I think I hinted at this earlier that the sample data only had 3 rows of numbers, and then the fourth one was the operation, whereas the actual input has 4 rows of numbers. And so, I mean, I should have written it to where it was like, the length of the table, not an actual number. But I spent so much time on the string parsing that I was just so fixated on the sample, and I was just kind of assuming that was going to be what the input was, just with more numbers, but it was actually a whole nother row. And so, that tripped me up for a second.
That part actually tripped me up on part 1 because I was looking at length of lines, and not length of maximum columns or whatever. And so, that briefly messed me up because it jumped there as well, which I thought was a little deviously clever on their part. Anyway, go ahead.
They love doing that, where the sample data, even if you get your code to run on it and it's fine, that the input will be different and will have edge cases. And so it really tests the generalization of your algorithm, not the specificity of it to the sample, which, I get caught up in all the time, especially the longer I work on a problem. I'm just so like, I can't even get the sample to pass. I got to write my code so the sample passes, rather than does it solve, any input data that is in this format, regardless of rows, regardless of columns. And so, I mean, I finished this one like an hour or two before day 7 even came out. So this was probably the one that I worked on the longest, mainly because I spent so much time doing other ideas of how to parse this until I just wrote it from the ground up, from scratch, rethinking it. And that's really how you should do this kind of stuff, But I was happy to get it.
That's how day 5 was for me.
I mean, thankfully they didn't make this harder by also throwing in subtraction and division.
That's what I thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
I was like, because then order matters, and then you have to start thinking about it. But I'm like, order doesn't matter here. It's just you go until you're not going, and
yeah. So this one was
it wasn't terrible.
It's not like it was tough, but it really made you stop and think about like, okay, what are they asking, and how do I actually model this in code? So, yeah. All right. Well, that's day 6. That's the first half of Advent of Code 2025, and I think that's a good place to stop for here. What's your take roughly on this year compared to previous years? Because I know you had mentioned that like, it's only going to be like half the problems. Is the difficulty going to be different? Like, do you think it's harder at the halfway point compared to normal years, or?
Well, it's easier at the halfway point, certainly, right?
Yeah.
Because normally we'd be on day 12 or have just finished day 12.
Yeah.
When we were having this conversation. And by day 12, it's usually pretty hard or starting to get real hard. But I feel like this is roughly equivalent to where we would be on day 6 normally. Maybe a little bit harder, but not. I feel like by day 6, I'm still chugging along at this rate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at my past years, and I would say, by this point, I still am sort of getting part 1. I'm starting to not get part 2s. So, I mean, the fact that I have part 1 and part 2 definitely is due to using an LLM for me on some of these. Like, I would not have finished probably 3 or 5, at least not at this point. I'd still be like thinking about it. And so it's definitely helped me get through a lot faster.
I don't like when I can't get through both parts on the day that it came out. It upsets me.
I'm much happier to, on day 7, have days 1 through 6 done, because otherwise I look at it and it feels like a burden, and I feel like, ugh, I didn't really do it. So, but we're here, and that's the first 6 days. So congratulations for getting through it. I think it's the right amount of difficulty. It's still, it's Advent of Code. It hasn't really changed in terms of like what they would throw at us. No huge surprises yet, but we'll see. We still got 6 more days to go. So
yeah, I'm waiting for the crazy like, this will generate a picture on some frame, and you have to figure out what. No, I'm still mad about that one.
You're gonna hold that grudge to your dying days, aren't you?
If you don't show me what the picture looks like, I can't programmatically figure it out. Christmas trees can look a bunch of ways. Come on.
Oh man,
Anyway.
was that last year or was that 2 years ago?
I think it was last year. I'm still mad about it though.
Yeah.
Whenever it was, it could have been 10 years ago, and I'd still be mad.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us through the first 6 days. We will come back with more Advent of Code as we complete it and it is released, not necessarily in that order. But if you want to listen to our other episodes, you can go to hackingthegrepson.com. We have several years of Advent of Code jawing and tinkering and other words that involve talking about things.
We may even have 24 episodes worth of Advent of Code material at this point. You could turn our Advent of Code episodes into an Advent calendar.
Wow. Now that's some out of the box meta thinking right there.
I don't know if it's true, but at some point that'll be true.
But yeah, until we come back with our thoughts on further Advent of Code, and we will return to game making, but it may not be until next year just because of Advent of Code and holidays and stuff. But until then, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.